from Trae Young, taking up Atlanta's cap space with below-average on-ball defense, to an overpriced deal between the Wizards and Otto Porter Jr. These are the most overpaid players in the NBA. Let's start with Atlanta's Trae Young, who was compensated with a whopping $38 million. Sure, it's impressive that he's been an all-star twice, and I understand that Atlanta did what it needed to do to lock up its most valuable asset, but is he really the best player on a team that wins it all? Let's be real, is he even the second best player on a championship team? He does make a lot of points, but the Hawks never do well with him in the lead. Young takes up a lot of cap space and isn't the best at making three-point shots. The dude isn't great on defense either, so I don't know how they see him. Unfortunately, though, he isn't the only ex-All-Star player being overpaid right now. There's also Ben Simmons from the Brooklyn Nets, who's currently being paid around $35.5 million. Ben Simmons' strange story is becoming a sad one because there's seriously something wrong with the three-time All-Star. Physically, he's fine, but it's clear that he's still afraid to shoot threes. And this fear has gotten so bad that he won't even attempt a shot. Simmons is now the third-string center for the team, and based on his performance, Simmons should definitely not be paid $35 million per year. Then there are players whose success is mostly based on what might happen, like Gordon Hayward from the Hornets. The dude's getting paid around $30 million? But what if that horrible foot accident hadn't happened? Regardless, Hayward's being paid like a number 1 or number 2 choice, but he hasn't played that well since Utah. You see, his career was ruined by the injury he got in Boston, and even though Gordon's still a skilled player, the problem is that the 33-year-old hasn't had a season with more than 52 games since 2018, so paying him over $30 million doesn't make sense, even if it's during the regular season. And with the NBA season coming to an end, teams will start trading certain players, and it looks like Hayward will be one of them. But these days, though, it looks like everyone loves wing defenders who hang out in the corner and shoot threes. That's why Tim Hardaway Jr. of the Mavericks is being paid so much, like roughly $19.6 million. That's because the 3-and-D job has become very important in the NBA over the last few years. In this guy's case, though, he's more of a 3-and-D guy in theory than in practice. Sure, he's active, athletic, and quick on his feet. This year, he even managed to shoot a decent 38% from three-point range. But it doesn't matter, because his average field goal percentage is a terrible 39%, and it gets worse in defensive win shares, where he's ranked 162nd in the NBA as a whole. Hardaway Jr. also scored the lowest points per game for a single season in 2015, and the lowest PPG total in a season since 2015. That's why the Mavericks would be better off without him. Now, can you imagine some players like these having their contracts revised, and the amount was increased instead? Well, that's what happened in the case of Marvin Bagley of the Detroit Pistons. This guy was the second pick in the 2018 NBA draft and is currently signed with the Pistons for a whopping $12.5 million. But the player's a gamble, since he only has one more year left on his contract after this one. He never did well in Sacramento, mainly because the attitude around De'Aaron Fox was still changing. Bagley isn't a great rim protector as a defense either, and because he's so thin and wiry, he's often picked on when he's in the box. Marvin isn't even 25 yet, so he still has a lot of time to become a good NBA player, but based on his numbers, $12 million seems a bit too much. Now, paying up-and-coming athletes excessively makes sense because they still have potential, but paying players who are way past their prime is just confusing. Take Draymond, for example. It doesn't make sense for a player in his 30s to be making almost $25.8 million. When we talk about Draymond as a basketball player, his intangibles come to mind first. As the leader of his team's defense, he has been bringing a lot to the table for a long time. And as a passer and defender, Green can study the game better than anyone else in the NBA right now. You can't take away his history of winning championships or what he's done for the team as a whole. But you got to admit, the game is taking a toll on his body, and there'll be a time when he won't be able to bring his A game. Another player like Green, who was great in his prime, is none other than Nicholas Batum. He was a versatile swingman who could score, make plays, grab rebounds, and defend different spots. But he didn't put up huge offensive numbers. The guy wasn't even as good as some of the contracts he had signed during his career, like the 5-year, $120 million deal he signed in the 2016 summer, which was one of the biggest overpayments in history. But that's not the most he's ever gotten. In the 2019 to 2020 season, Batum was paid around $25.6 million. His career has been going well since he joined the Clippers, which helped him get a 2-year, $22.6 million deal from the team. Some players, on the other hand, get paid even when they miss games because of their injuries. That's right, I'm talking about John Wall. In this era of huge salaries, Wall had a max deal, but injuries forced him to miss 2 full basketball seasons. He only played in 40 games for Houston in 2021-22, where he averaged 20.6 points on 40.4% shooting. Wall made $82.5 million during the 2 seasons he missed. And when he did play in between, the guy was paid $41.3 million, which was $28.6 million more than he was worth. Then there are contracts that really stink, because the players just don't come through at all. That's right, I'm looking at you, Chandler Parsons. In 2016, Parsons signed a 4-year, $94.5 million deal with the Grizzlies, which is thought to be one of the worst contracts ever given out in the NBA. In the season before that, he had quite a few injury problems, and they only got worse after he signed the huge deal that ruined his career. Parsons received a huge $24.6 million overpayment. This next player's pay, though, would make sense if he was still fit enough to play, but Blake Griffin's best years are long behind him. He was a double-double machine who regularly put up big numbers, but because of his health, Griffin's best years finished sooner than they should have. So he's considered to be overpaid by regular standards. Before this season, Griffin had missed 26.4% of the regular season games he could have played. And that's not even counting the fact that he had to sit out his full rookie year because of a knee injury. But the amount that some of these players get paid in a single year is more than you'd make from a multi-year deal. And Mike Conley is one of them. $34.5 million is a huge amount of money. It made Conley the 11th highest paid player in the league, which made no sense at the time, because he just had his worst season in a decade with the Utah Jazz. He only managed to play 12 games in the 2017-2018 season because of his Achilles heel injuries, and considering how his first season with the Jazz was a bust, there's good reason to be a little unsure about his future. That's not all, though. The rise of Donovan Mitchell meant that Utah no longer needed a traditional point guard to handle the ball and run the game. The Jazz's best player was handling more and more of these tasks well. That's almost as bad as it can get for a 1-year deal. Almost. It looks like teams have had so much money to spend lately that they don't seem to know what to do with it half the time. This has been going on since the summer of 2016, and that's how Otto Porter Jr. got overpaid. This overpriced deal between the Wizards and Otto was signed in 2017, and it was a huge 4-year, $106.5 million deal that came after. Porter had played well for only 2 seasons. Washington gave Porter that deal even though he'd never been an all-star or won any kind of award. He didn't live up to it, but that wasn't his fault. Porter was paid more than he was worth in 2020-21 when he averaged 9.7 points over 28 games despite being hurt a lot and making $28.5 million. If you really do the math, that was a $22.5 million overpayment. So there you have it. From an overpriced deal between the Wizards and Otto Porter Jr. to Trae Young taking up Atlanta's cap space with below-average ball defense, those were some of the most overpaid players in the NBA.